It's truly unbelievable the lengths a human can go when they want to prove they're right. In today's Top 10, we're going to see together the worst medical experiments ever conducted on humans. Hope you got a strong stomach because some of the descriptions and events you're going to see, they're absolutely horrendous. Are you ready? Don't say we didn't warn you. Let's go. Number 1, Monster Study. In 1939, speech pathologists at the University of Iowa had an idea. Amazingly, they went through with it. Their idea was that stuttering was a learned behavior. It was caused by child's anxiety over speaking. Now, it's all good till we get here. Anyone can have a theory, but the way they went out to prove it, monstrous, to say the least. They went at the Ohio Soldiers and Sailors Orphans Home, sat down with orphans, and simply told them, "You will start stuttering soon because you're showing signs of it, and they shouldn't speak at all. Unless they're absolutely certain they would utter a word correctly." As you can imagine, the experiment did not induce stuttering, but it did make the children anxious, silent, and withdrawn. In 2007, Iowa and the university gave to the families and the 3 surviving children of the experiment a total of $925,000. Number 2, the separation. How can you do this with little children? How can you do this to a little baby, innocent children being torn apart at birth? That was the question asked by Robert Shafran on the Orlando Sentinel in 1997. Robert was one of the triplets that fell victim of one truly gruesome experiment. In the 1960s and 70s, an experiment was run by a psychologist that was partly funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, in which they were separating twins and triplets from each other and adopted them out as singlets. When the 3 siblings accidentally found each other in 1980, they were amazed at how evil people could truly be. The scientists showed no remorse, and we won't know what they discovered with their experiment until 2066, when the stored archive at Yale University can be unsealed. Number 3, the Stanford Prison Experiment. Philip Zimbardo. He had a question in 1971, and his question was, what happens when you put good people in evil situations? So he set out to test the nature of human nature. Theoretically, there's no problem with him wanting to find the answer or answers to the question. Practically, there was a problem, and a quite nasty one. The way he went on to experiment was to set up a prison and paid college students to play guards and prisoners. The experiment was supposed to go on for 2 weeks, but after 6 days it was shut down because, of course, things got chaotic. The guards became quickly sadistic, and the prisoners developed signs of depression and extreme stress. A publication in June 2018 revealed that the guards didn't become so abusive by themselves, but Zimbardo actually encouraged that behavior to the point where the guards were stripping naked the prisoners and spraying their bodies with delousing chemicals. Number 4, the Tuskegee Study. This experiment is one we still have a hard time believing it actually happened, not because there's not enough proof, but because it's so evil. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service launched a study on the health effects of untreated syphilis. The participants, 399 black men in Alabama, and they were told they were being treated for bad blood. They weren't being treated even in 1947 when penicillin became the drug of choice to treat syphilis. These men were being lied to again and again, and it wasn't until 1972 when a newspaper article exposed the study to the public, and that's when they finally had to shut it down. Only 74 of the subjects were still alive, with 28 dying directly from syphilis. 100 died from complications related to syphilis. 40 of the patients' wives were infected with syphilis, and 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. Number 5, the Agent Orange experiments. From 1965 to 1966, Dr. Albert Kligman, funded by Dow Chemical, Johnson & Johnson, and the U.S. Army, gathered 75 prisoners and started conducting what he called dermatological research. What he actually did was study the effects of Agent Orange on humans. How did he go about it? Well, he injected the prisoners with dioxin, which is a toxic byproduct of Agent Orange. How much did he use? 468 times the amount that the study originally called for. And the result? The prisoners suffered volcanic eruptions of chloracne, and that's severe acne, combined with a lot of nasty stuff. They had it on their faces, their armpits, their groin. The prisoners continued to suffer years after this dermatological research ended. You want to know if he had remorse? Well, here's the quote from him that will tell you all you need to know. "All I saw before me were acres of skin. It was like a farmer seeing a fertile field for the first time." Number 6, the experiments of J. Marion Sims. He's considered the father of modern gynecology, but his story is dark, really, really dark. J. Marion Sims became famous by conducting experimental surgery on slave women, and sometimes performed more than one on the same person. Although the condition he was treating in the women, vesicovaginal fistula, caused terrible suffering, Sims performed the surgeries without anesthesia because he believed the operations, quote, were not painful enough to justify the trouble, close quote. Yes, he actually said those words in a lecture in 1857. They still don't know if patients were free to choose if they wanted surgery or not, and he still remains a controversial figure to this day. Number 7, the Nazi medical experiments. If you haven't heard the name of Joseph Mengele until now, well, prepare to never forget it. He was an SS physician at Auschwitz and was definitely what you would call an evil scientist. He was determined to prove theories of racial supremacy of the Aryans, killing a lot of people in the process. Not only did he kill them with his experiments, he was also gathering the eyes of his victims, according to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. One of the horrendous experiments was to tie off a woman's breast with a string so the SS doctors would see how long it took for a baby to starve. Mengele escaped to South America after the war, and he died in Brazil in 1979. Number 8, the Birkin murders. If you've ever heard about grave robbers, then you know how truly desperate people were, both for money and for science. Up until the 1830s, the only legally available bodies for dissection by anatomists were those of murderers who were executed. Because there weren't so many, though, grave robbers emerged, stealing bodies for a fee and just giving them to the anatomist. William Hare and his friend William Burke, though, they wanted to go a bit further. From 1827 to 1828, the two men killed more than a dozen lodgers at a boarding house and sold their bodies to an anatomist. His name? Robert Knox. And he didn't either notice they were brutally murdered, or most likely, he didn't care. Number 9 is the chamber. We've all heard about the atrocities that were happening in the Soviet gulags, but it's until you hear this particular experiment that you will start to grasp how truly awful and inhuman they really were. In the Cold War, the prisoners in the gulags were taken to a lab known as the chamber, which they were given meals and beverages that had mustard gas, ricin, digitoxin, and many more things hidden in them. Many of the prisoners were complaining about their food, but there wasn't much they could do. Finally, the Soviet secret police came up with a poison they were happy with, called C2. This caused actual physical change to the victim by making them shorter, and because of that, they were weakened and usually died within 15 minutes. Number 10, the Japan Unit 731. This story is so terrible it seems like it comes straight out of a horror film. In the 30s and 40s, the Japanese Imperial Army conducted biological warfare and medical testing on civilians. The exact death toll is not known, but from a 1995 New York Times report, more than 200,000 people died because of it. One of the experiments? To march the prisoners in freezing water and then try different treatments for frostbite. Also, former members of the unit have come out and admitted they were dosing the prisoners with poison gas and then putting them in a pressure chamber until their eyes popped out. After the war ended, the U.S. government helped keep those experiments secret as part of the plan to make Japan their ally in the Cold War. Well, there you have it for today. These were the top 10 worst medical experiments on humans. Which one did you find the most atrocious and why? Let us know in the comments, and as always, don't forget to give the video a like and then go right ahead and subscribe to the channel with your notifications on. We'll see you next time.